Luke Donald and Bethpage, the potential, whether it's Luke or another captain there, just talking about both sides of the captains in general.
Yeah.
So let's start with Europe, because you talked about Luke Donald. So Europe appears to be clearing the way for a second term for Luke Donald. We saw all the players on the podium rallying for it.
Seems that way.
And this is a really interesting one, because they normally have like this really rigorous application interview process, one that Luke Donald actually went through and was passed over in favor of Henrik Stenson initially, and he was obviously really bummed about that. Then the whole thing with Stenson going to live happens. They reach out to Luke, he becomes a captain. The rest is, of course, history. So what's been reported is that Luke does not want to go through that process again, and he feels like Marco Simone was probably good enough of a resume to get him the job if he wants it. And also, their sort of panel of deciding this includes the last 3 Europe captains. So he'd be one of the votes. Yeah, I'd just like for me to be the captain. So the reason I find this all interesting is, is this a good idea for a guy that, hey, you put together a great sort of team room and feeling and energy playing a home game with Marco Simone, but do you risk kind of losing those romantic feelings when you got to go on the road and play in front of a hostile crowd at Bethpage? Does that feel like he's the right guy for that job?
To me, it feels like the Ryder Cup captaincy should be on a 4-year basis. Like, I think you should get home and in a way, because to me, it seems like Luke Donald deserves an opportunity to go see if he can do it on the road. And same, I know a lot of people have criticized Zach Johnson and his Ryder Cup captaincy, but I do think, it'd be cool to see if he'd be able to win a Ryder Cup at home, because obviously there's a clear advantage playing at home than away. And he didn't have the guys necessarily in form and didn't necessarily play well. So you'd love to see if you can be a captain of a Ryder Cup team where your guys are all playing well. You have the right team, you have the right team, and then you can maybe pull the right strings and make the right moves and learn from your last captain mistake. So I think it'd be cool to see him run it back. But if I'm like throwing names up for the European side, I would say the 2 that come to mind would be Justin Rose and Eduardo Molinari. It seems like those 2 guys have Rose. Obviously he's a Ryder Cup legend. What we saw this week, maybe a potential playing captain. And then Eduardo Molinari just seems like he's a total innovator in the golf space, and the fact that he was a great, fantastic golfer. Still, I think he still plays a little bit. I'm not quite positive.
Well, he was, famously, that going back to that BMW PGA Championship week, 5 of the, because obviously they have the captain and 5 vice captains, right? And all of them played except for Jose Maria. So he was of course one that played alongside Francesco and
Eduardo was the guy that he was thought to be better than Francesco Molinari, and then Francesco goes on that crazy run, and then Eduardo because I think Eduardo played some golf over here in the PGA Tour. I'm not sure if he played full seasons, but I definitely know he was a part of the WGCs before his brother was. But besides the point, Eduardo seems to be he seemed to be incredibly important to why the Europe was so successful, due to his stats and analysis that he provides for players. And I could see that him being a potential captain because how well liked he is in the team room. Great dude. And obviously Francesco being his brother, you would have to imagine he'd be involved. But then the American side, I really think Stuart Sink would be a terrific captain. I think him being a vice captain I just think he's an awesome dude. I think he doesn't have those relationships quite like Zach Johnson, where everybody talks about Zach's best friends with JT, Jordan, whoever. I think Stewart's definitely much more of a kind of goes in his own lane, does his own thing, has great relationships with guys out on tour, but I think he would learn from the captain before him and pick the best team. So I would like to see Stewart, but I think a lot of the conversations right now are, if Tiger wants to do it, it's Tiger's to lose, right?
So let me ask you on Tiger, because I think it's such an interesting one. On the one hand, he's the greatest player in the history of the golf. I guess you could put him up there alongside Jack, but just in terms of our collective memories and recent memory, Tiger is it, right? But you can't argue that he did not have a great record in a lot of these Ryder Cups and competitions. Like, he wasn't a great match play player and teammate. Now, some of that wasn't his doing, getting paired with Phil Mickelson and things like that, right? But you wonder if
it seemed like they were set up for failure a little bit more, and
exactly.
And you wondered how much he cared. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was
no. I think that's fair. That's completely that's helpful context, and so it just paints both sides of that argument. It's like is he the perfect guy to kind of hit the reset button and take this in a whole different direction? And you have a whole generation of guys like JT who grew up just idolizing the guy, and now they're getting pointers from him. He's been a mentor to a lot of these guys. Like, that would feel like the ultimate, I have respect for this guy over anybody else sort of situation. But then you juxtapose that against, how good was he in those settings, and you wonder if that would have any sort of impact on whether he'd be good as a captain.
He was the captain of the President's Cup. Let's not forget, right. He's done this before
as a playing captain, right? Yeah,
he was a playing captain.
So look, this is actually, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tiger, but I also would love to hear your thoughts on, let's say Tiger becomes the captain here, right? Do you think we see a reset of that backroom staff where, everyone bemoaned the whole boys club thing? Like could you see him bringing in a new wave of vice captains that then constitute the next wave of captains in Ryder Cups and President's Cup? And maybe that could be his lasting legacy.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, I don't know why that's such a big topic of conversation of Zach picking his friends. I don't think it was ever about that. We've
right.
If you've been listening to our podcast, you know that his options were all the same. It was just a bucket of all the same players. It wasn't obvious who he should have taken. And I think Keegan Bradley was probably the one guy that you're like, you know what? I think you look back and say that Keegan Bradley could have done better than any of the picks. You can make an argument, but you don't know. I have a hard time believing that Lucas Glover not playing any major championships this year can go in that environment, which I walk through. It's insane. Like, I don't doubt that he can do it, but as a captain, you're like, man, I just don't know what I'm going to get. So I understand why he wasn't picked. Now, you can make the same argument about JT and his form, and that, well, you could say, well, he didn't really play a major championship this year because he didn't perform. I get it, but like, when you're looking at the bucket that Zach was looking at for picks this year, it wasn't necessarily good options. You're like, it was obvious to me who Luke Donald should have picked, but it wasn't as obvious on the Zach side. Mm-hmm. I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent here. But
yeah.
When it comes to Tiger Woods and who he would potentially pick if he was a captain, who his vice captains would be. Listen, I think what Tiger's always done a very good job of is he's been very good at making decisions that are fairly black and white. He separates, kind of the media from his opinions to what he knows to be true. And you would expect how he's made decisions with his business and golf that he would also carry that intelligent brain of his, that he's arguably one of the most intelligent golfers of our generation, that he would be able to sort through all the mud and the mess to be able to get the right captains and also be able to pick the right team. But let's put Tiger Woods in the shoes of Zach Johnson, and who would he have picked? I don't think you can maybe make arguments he picks a different team, but I don't think it's that different. I just think Europe played better than the U.S., and Zach didn't have the right guys in form. And to me, it all came down to that, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think, on the Zach piece, I think his hand was forced in a lot of ways by his automatic qualifiers. I mean, you referenced the Data Golf report at the beginning of this podcast, and we'll get into it, in a little bit as we kind of break down on a player by player basis. But, if the second guy on your list in terms of qualification points is Wyndham Clark, and Data Golf shows him as the worst player in terms of strokes gained, and the entire 24 player, big air quotes, field, but those are the 24 guys that played. That's really, really tough, versus like I think the second qualifier on world points and Europe points is John Rahm, who was the second best player in terms of strokes gained total in the whole field. So it's like he kind of had to make some back end picks to compensate for the lack of experience in the qualifiers. And that's
totally.
And that's no knock on a Wyndham Clark or, even a Brian Harmon, who I think was middle of the pack strokes gained, playing their first, they're doing the best they can out there, but it definitely was a tough assignment for Zach. And going back to what you said, which I love that idea of like a 4-year term for these captains. Wouldn't it be cool for Tiger to go into a place that's like as hostile of an environment as you can create?
Bethpage Black behind Tiger in New York, man. Holy crap.
New mentality, getting the guys fired up, getting behind him and saying, all right, remember this right here? That's what we're taking to Adair Manor in 2027. And that's how we're going to go win the Cup back on foreign soil. I mean, that would be pretty sweet.
I would love for Tiger to be the guy at Bethpage, but boy, do I want him on an away Ryder Cup team. Like that, to me, like him and at Adair Manor, that would be electric, him trying to go win an away Ryder Cup. Because honestly, that, to me, the jobs for Tiger screens more away Ryder Cup than it does home Ryder Cup. Just with all the bull crap that you have to deal with US United States fans, which rightfully so. Like the New York crowd it's a wild bunch. So give them credit, but it's going to be nuts. But just a lot of controversy. I know a lot of people who are listening are probably, when I talked about Zach Johnson, they're like, talking about 4-year terms. I think a lot of people are done with Zach, and I think I will criticize his pairings, because I think every day I would look at the pairings and be like, God, what are we doing here? Because I did not understand sending. I thought Sam Burns would have been perfect to go out in the 4-ball in the afternoon. It made so much sense for him to go do that and then play foursomes with Scotty the next morning after he had a day underneath him. And so they go out, they play, they lose. And then I was surprised to see Ricky not go out and play any best ball format. I know he was under the weather and sick, but to me, the guys who hadn't played in Ryder Cups in a while or just aren't in form, you don't put them in the foursome stuff. Like you want to have the guys that are in the best form possible. It just didn't make any sense. And every day there was, to me, like there was a pairings crisis that I was just like, wait, what are we doing here? Like, just doesn't make any sense. And I honestly, my favorite pairing of the week was the one that got drum 9 and 7. I was like, oh, they're 100% going to win this match. And that was just a product of those two guys, Ludwig and Victor, playing so well, beating Brooks and Scotty. But I did have issues with a lot of the pairings with what Zach did, but it just was too little too late, and the guys obviously just didn't quite have it. But you just have to wonder if it would have been any different, and if the pairings would have been mixed up a little better.
Yeah, I shared the same sort of maybe confusion at those specific pairings. Like I really would have loved to see, and this is like, I don't know what this is, Monday morning third string quarterback, because I what I would have advocated for is sending Scotty and Brooks out early, and that Friday morning for foursomes and just setting a tone with two kind of,
100%.
Heavy hitters. And then maybe they don't play as bad the next day because they go out and then, you bring, of course, Sam Burns in for the 4-ball in the afternoon. And then also on Ricky after Jordan struggled in the morning session on Saturday. Again, no, he's under the weather, but
exactly.
Would have hated to see Jordan and Ricky
play. I thought I was going to see Justin and Ricky go out that next morning in the 4-ball setting and didn't see, but Jordan actually played he actually got in a little better form as the day went on Saturday. But I was surprised by that. I really felt like the Colin Ricky pairing didn't make any sense to me. Just that I thought Colin would have been much more suited or better suited with like Brooks or somebody like Brooks, who gives him a little bit of length, where Ricky's actually sneaky long pound for pound at his size, but it just didn't necessarily make sense because like those two guys, like Colin had started getting form as the year had finished up, but like you could make an argument that he wasn't necessarily in form either. So, gosh, man,
Brooks kind of fits, not exactly similar, but kind of fits the DJ profile.
Right,
of like,
which
dude,
is what
DJ and Colin was tied for the best pairing at Whistling Straits. So
the only pairing that came out of it really was Max Hulme and Brian Harmon, which was like the most opposite thing I thought I'd see this week. It was like, wait, those two guys are going to play together? Like, I thought I'd see Max with like Ricky or Max and Wyndham, I'd heard rumors that those two guys, Max and Wyndham, were going to play together, and they played well together in the 4-ball. And I thought we might see them that next morning on Saturday go out and play because they played so well in the 4-ball. But it seemed like Luke Donald had his strategy and just executed it because like he didn't have to change. And to me, Zach did the exact same, where I felt like he should have been a little bit more reactive to what he saw in the golf. I know he can't watch all the guys play, but to me, I think he stuck too much to the script and didn't react a little bit to kind of how the guys were performing.
Yeah, you know what? And I think every piece of this, you kind of pull back and realize even more why Zach was in a tough spot, right? Because it's like he had to be to some degree reactive because he had no clue how this team was going to play together for the first time, with a lot of these guys being, rookies or younger. And on the other side, Justin Rose, we heard in the press conference on Sunday, the winners press conference, talking about how Luke had this plan, along with the information that Eduardo Molinari gave him, and they got good information. And he made an analogy to like, hey, when your caddy gives you good information, you can hit good shots. And the whole time we had this plan and we executed it. And so I think it's like, it illustrates what a tough spot Zach was in, just because he had a plan. It's like, do I stick to this? And even if we had a rough first session, or do we kind of go in a different direction? And ultimately it was just too big of a hole to crawl out of. But, it was a tough hand of cards to get dealt.